Remember, beyond imagination lies the truth. Everyone lives in his or her own illusions, or if you like, belief systems. And each one of us sees the world around our own individual selves differently. There is a difference between a child and an adult, as we all know. When we closely examine people's psychological makeup, we can soon discover how education, parents' religion, and their life experiences create their illusions of reality. But realities differ from one person to another, from one race to another, from one religious identity to another. What one person may consider as reality, on the other hand, may be the most absurd illusion for another. People are used to experiencing what they consider as normal, like sunrise and sunset. But when one claims to have seen, say, a UFO, one is never considered as normal in today's world, even though there seems to be enough evidence as to the reality of such a phenomenon when they are spotted on their radar. There are certain religious belief systems today where their adherents cannot see anything other than doom and gloom. They look at world events, as they have been doing throughout the centuries, and try to interpret them in the light of Bible prophecies and the Bible wisdom. It is indeed very dependent on how they interpret it. For instance, if you sacrifice yourself in the name of a god, killing a few humans, you will be taken to heaven and be served by the angels. Some prefer to do so, denying all possibility of the existence of light. Others prefer to consider it as the will of a great God. Man has always been wary of his environment and the possible dangers just lurking around the corner, and so he must defend and protect his own. However, when there is a God and a devil, good and evil, this makes it easier to leave his fights to some other authority, and so he soon discovers he should be a part of a community he imagines the good God favors and protects against the evil. Now he has done his duty. Now he can go on with his own life without worrying. He accepts that sin entered the world, and good Lord decided to send his Son to be sacrificed for humanity to become sinless again. And he believes that this way he will have everlasting life as promised in the Bible. That too is commendable. If there is a conflict, he knows that by belonging to a God-favored community, he will be protected, or else he will be taken into a heavenly abode where exists no enmity, no ill health, no resentment, only a joyful life. Man has also found an interesting solution to the practicing evildoers. They will be banished into the hellfire to suffer there forever. When we examine this closely, we can easily see how desperately people needed to find some meaning in their lives with complete justification. There are a countless number of sects and cults today, and the members of their organizations take it to extremes. We have seen the results and tragic endings over the years. However, from birth, people are desirous to turn everything into peace. They also tend to underestimate the possibility of disasters and their effect when they are faced with imminent devastation and disaster. Generally speaking, people are not truly prepared, just the same as their local governments. Think about tsunamis and earthquakes. How prepared are you? How prepared is your community? Similarly, a number of people believe that it is impossible for extraterrestrials to come to our world, considering it all as an illusion despite thousands of people reporting seeing them. Just imagine when there is undeniable proof of extraterrestrial intelligent life, how many dreams would be shattered to pieces? Can you imagine? The truth is that many individuals' reality would never take into account the different perspectives which do not fit the norm. There are also people who conveniently think of UFOs as evil or as enemies of their God. But we cannot simply ignore those who see them as friends of humanity. How can people know who or what they are if they have no idea about them and whether they existed at all? There are too many stories and theories about why they exist and why they are visiting Earth. Our scientists popularly prefer to ignore them, whereas some of our belief systems, such as the Jehovah's Witnesses, consider them as demons, devils, and evil spirits. Interestingly, they apparently kidnap people from time to time and mutilate cattle. Since the existence of UFOs is fiercely denied, we ask, why is there a threat to our national security? We would like to hear the responses of people out there. What do you think? That brings us to the subject of life on Earth and elsewhere. Question: what is life? What does it mean to be alive? What does it mean to be here or somewhere else? Do we only live here on Earth? Are there any parallels of us elsewhere? Old questions. Are we alone? Can those people claiming to be in touch with other worlds be correct? Firstly, we might need to separate the chaff from the crop and be very discerning when analyzing the facts. What is the difference between right and wrong, good and evil, truth and a lie? Let us aim at the message, not the messenger, and be cautious. UFOs. Myth or reality? As you know, some claim to have seen them, and others claim they were in their dreams. We discover that a number of adults as well as children, including people in prominent positions such as lawyers and police officers, claim to have seen them. When airborne personnel and commercial pilots have also seen them, and their existence can be proved as they have been detected on their radar screens. Although the exact nature of those unidentified objects on flight may not be fully understood, their existence cannot be denied. Are we collectively creating such phenomena in our imaginations as human beings because we want them to be there? Or are they truly visiting us from afar? Can all those people claiming to have seen them be hallucinating or even lying? Could they be right? Is it a result of mass hypnosis? Or is it something we have yet to discover? Only recently we have enjoyed several documentaries on our television screens about the human brain and consciousness. They declare that everything we see is not necessarily real. Therefore, can we truly trust our conscious or unconscious minds? Remember, it seems our unconscious minds control everything about us, everything that makes us, human. Even the concept of color seems to be an illusion. So are the sounds. We probably see in black and white, but a variety of frequency ranges produced by light are interpreted as color, so that we can either distinguish different objects around us or simply enjoy them, or discard them. But there are many more things we are unable to see. Think of the current astronomy studies considering the dark recesses of the universe we occupy. Because our anatomy is not familiar with the frequency ranges, we interpret them as darkness. However, we also know that darkness and black is absorption of all colors, whereas light and white is the opposite, a reflection of all colors. When the candle burns to its ember, and finally it is no more, imagine where the flame and the candle is gone. Now let us conduct an imaginary experiment. An experiment of a pen attached to an apparatus which swings it from side to side. When you start the machine, you notice first the blur which the pen makes, and if we increase the speed, eventually you may hear a little buzz and then see a faint light. Increase the speed still further, and you may discover that the pen has disappeared. Your logic tells you that it is still there, but the speed of it has created such a high frequency that you can no longer see it. Now slow it down, and you will see that the opposite begins to occur. And as the speed reduced, eventually, your pen becomes visible until it is stationary again. If you have a white-colored disc with a few black markings, and you turn it very quickly on your turntable, you become aware of the sense of color. If you added a few more shapes or lines, you would discover that you have created different shades of color, whereas it never existed in the first place. Likewise, if you use the spectral colors of the rainbow on that disk, turning it fast upon its axis, you end up creating white light, where originally it was not there. Do you see everything? Your unconscious mind creates, allowing the experience or stops you altogether. You can look at a page of a newspaper for a few seconds, and when asked what you have seen, you would probably have some idea. But under hypnosis, you may be able to recite sentences from top to bottom of the page. Why? Because in your daily life, quite naturally, you do not need all that information. Your unconscious mind makes room for the more important things in your existence. Is it possible then that some of us have the ability to see what others consider non-existent? For example, can you see your thoughts? In the 1950s, there was someone who was known as a philosopher, a teacher, student, and a researcher. When I was only a young boy, I became aware of his reality, for I have written to him, and he responded to me. He was George Adamski. Have you heard about him? Well, let me tell you a little bit more. He claimed that he has met with friendly Nordic space brothers and have taken flights with them in their spaceships. A Polish-born American citizen, born on 17th of April 1891, he was well known in ufology circles, specifically because he claimed to have photographed them and their ships from other worlds. Many of his claims were met with total skepticism. He wrote a book entitled Flying Saucers Have Landed, which detailed his experiences, writing it with Desmond Leslie, and the book became the bestseller. When he spent some time in Laguna Beach, Adamski founded the Royal Order of Tibet, and the newly formed group held meetings in the Temple of Scientific Philosophy. In 1940, he and his followers moved to a ranch near Paloma Mountain in California, educating themselves and partially farming the property. In 1944, one of Adamski's students, Mrs. Alice K. Wells, provided him with the funds. That year he added another 20 acres or so of land to his property, and they built a new home called Paloma Garden and a new restaurant which they called Paloma Gardens Cafe. On 9th of October 1946, Adamski and his associates were observing a meteorite shower over the campground in the area. This is when it was alleged that they witnessed a large cigar-shaped mothership floating overhead. During the following year, in 1947, Adamski published a photograph of what they had seen during 1946 when it crossed in front of the moon over Paloma Gardens. Some years later, on 29th of May 1950, he took a trip into the Colorado desert, and they claimed to have seen a large aerial vehicle which looked like a submarine hovering above their heads. Adamski was under the impression that the pilots of that craft were there to meet him, and he left the company of his friends and headed away from the main road. Soon after, as within his own accounts, a translucent metal ship landed nearby, which he called a scout ship. And the pilot of that ship disembarked and approached him. He was reputed to be a Venusian by the name of Orthon. Adamski described Orthon as being of medium height, having long blonde hair, a flawless complexion, and wearing reddish-brown shoes. Adamski claimed that Hawthorne's trousers were not like his. Hawthorne apparently communicated with him using telepathy and hand signals. Hawthorne gave serious warning of the dangers to humanity of nuclear war and organized for Adamski to share a trip in his craft to observe the solar system. This included a flight to planet Venus. For some unusual reason, Adamski claimed that this planet was where his wife had recently incarnated. Although Hawthorne did not allow his photograph to be taken, he allegedly asked Adamski to provide him with a blank photographic plate, because that was the system to make photographs in his time. After they returned back and Hawthorne had left, Adamski and his friend George Williamson took plaster casts of Hawthorne's footprints, which had unusual symbols. However, Adamski angered certain people when he claimed that the images the Soviet lunar probe Luna 3 had taken in 1959 had been altered. They were claimed to be of far side of the moon, but Adamski claimed that there were cities, trees, and snow-capped mountains there. His claims were met with criticism and, obviously, controversy. He died on 23rd of April 1965 after an unfortunate and a massive heart attack. However, the debate regarding his claims, books and photographs continue, even today, believe it or not. Interestingly, Venus was named by a number of contactees as a world of ethereal magnificence. However, with today's research and scientific understanding, we know that Venus cannot contain human-like intelligence. Therefore, perhaps we need to concentrate on a different way of understanding this issue. Perhaps we can discover a more feasible explanation towards a clearer comprehension of the problem. Again, in the 1950s in France, a scientist by the name of Dr. Jacques Vallée showed great interest after seeing an aerial object over his own address in Pontoise. In 1961, using their instruments, he and his team detected an unknown object traveling in the opposite direction to the Earth's rotation. They considered it to be a natural asteroid captured by Earth's gravity, but a supervisor entered the room and erased the tape recording the event accidentally. And so Vallée began to focus his attention to solving the mystery of UFOs. He tried to validate the scientific research. In 1969, he was convinced about the need for another possibility. He was so certain that the answer to the nature of UFOs was probably metaphysical. He wrote several books. His third one, Passport to Magonia, detailed his thoughts. He claimed that the phenomena of extraterrestrials and aircraft were multidimensional, and therefore they could originate from within anywhere, any dimension outside the human space-time continuum. Alas, many ufologists opposed him because of his claims, and so he was not popular. However, the multidimensional theory can answer the question of UFOs and extraterrestrial visitations. Is it not interesting that we seem to be conditioned to believe that the reality is created by the information made available to our brains as being felt by our five senses. Today we are compliant about the existence of the electromagnetic spectrum and are aware of a great range of frequencies. We use those spectrums in our daily lives through radio, television, telephones, microwave ovens, and you name it. Even though we are unable to see those electromagnetic frequencies, just like our thoughts. We know they are there, just as we accept our world being static. Do we really feel the planet's motion in space, even though we live upon it? Just think about it. Earth feels static, and yet at its equator it rotates about 1037.5646 miles per hour, meaning about 1,180.7 kilometers an hour. The speed of our world around the sun is 107.300 kilometers an hour, or 67.062 miles an hour. But do we feel this movement? There are those who call themselves clairvoyants and psychics. They all tell us that higher worlds of spirit exist, while many scientists talk of definite theories, trying to describe the existence of different dimensions. The mathematics of quantum physics, or even the string theory, come close to explaining things. Yet many tend to refuse to accept the possibility that those other dimensions could explain the so-called spirit world. Some prefer to be critical for fear of losing their reputation, like Vallée, or be excommunicated from within the elite group. And as similarities can be seen in scientific circles, similar to religious doctrine. The fact that we have not currently invented ways to detect something different does not mean that they do not exist. Perhaps by some imagination, which is our fantastic tool, we will be able to solve this problem. As humans, we have the ability to cross the oceans to discover that the Earth is spherical, that there are other landmasses. If we had no desire, perhaps imprisoned into one landmass, believing that nothing else existed, we would never know what world existed beyond what we have imagined. Ufologists of today are like those genuine mystics, and even spiritualists know we need to have a positive approach to the subject with an open mind and consider the possibilities. We seem to go about our lives unaware that other realms do exist simultaneously and superimposed over ours, although their frequency ranges differ. Metaphysics point to the ideals of existing beyond death to our physicality. Those different realms, having higher frequencies, contain other forms, perhaps even human life, in its highest state after the exiting of physical life on Earth. But we can't be absolutely certain. It is said that some of the planets are allegedly the higher frequency versions of the harmonic manifestations of the physical dimension of ours. The whole of the universe is believed to be teeming with life across the cosmic bandwidth. Why then should it be impossible for the dwellers of those other realms and dimensions to adjust their frequency levels to be able to research into the other, even physical dimension of the galactic space. If one could accept the reality of those claims as a possibility, then perhaps we could look at the observations of George Adamski, Dr. Vallée, and others differently, and open the way to perhaps further understand our real place in the universe. In the case of so-called abductees, the experiences of many can be easily observed within the bounds of metaphysical study. Many such have discovered the nature of the experiences they had through the hypnotic regression. Like many, I too have experienced a number of unexplainable phenomena, and I am prepared to share them with anybody interested in knowing, not to ridicule, but take it seriously, at least that the possibility exists.